Sup shredders, my name is Logan aka Spiderhands and welcome to an SP Interviews. I think this is number 38 where today we are talking to Sammy Spaceman of Sodia as well as Bleakness of Eris. And if we switch over to here, we have Sodia, the Spotify for it on the screen, and we're actually talking to Sammy Spaceman themselves. We've got them on Zoom at the moment, so feel free to introduce yourself, Sammy.
Hello, what's up? My name is Sam. My pseudonym goes by the name Sammy Spaceman, as I said. I just turned 30 about a couple of days ago, so I'm an old man in disguise now.
Well, happy birthday! How was your birthday? Was it good?
Yeah, it was pretty good. We went out dinner, did ate some dinner, the classic kind of stuff, celebration. It was cool.
And so who are you as a human, but also as a musician? What do you do as a musician?
Well, I play, my primary instrument is playing the electric guitar because that's the one I write the most. But as I prefer to label myself more as a musician nowadays, because even though I write most of my stuff in the electric guitar, I tend to compose mostly uh, with songwriting, like with other instruments, like programming drums and that kind of extra stuff. What more is there to say? Like, yeah, songwriting. I have blank right in my head right now.
No, it's okay because you've got two projects. Sodia, how would you describe Sodia?
Sodia is weird. That's not sort of saying much. Sodia is it's very experimental. It's very grungy. But the funny thing is, when I first started Sodia, I sort of experimented with other different musical genres because as I did it in our first album, I had no clear directions. So I did one song that was a little bit more classic rock, the other one was a little bit more surf inspired, and the third one was a little bit more grungy. But after I released the debut album, Our Season to Come, I sort of wanted to expand my horizons more as a grunge musician. So after I did the single called Empty Room, which was more post-punk-ish, like The Cure-ish, that type of stuff. After that, I decided, I think what I exceed the most is writing grunge, because I've been a grunge fan since a long time ago. We love the iconic bands like Nirvana, Alice in Chains, Soundgarden,
Mm.
even some later like post-grunge influences like Decennium, those kinds of bands. And as time went on, I kind of realized I I love those bands, and my influences mostly comes from the 90s Seattle grunge era, even though I was not born at that time. I mean, I was born maybe like 1 month after Cobain's death.
All right.
So I did not get to see that, unfortunately. But those people who did see them, that must have been quite an experience. And so I sort of continued to write tracks like Man of Many Faces, like you reviewed. And then I continued to, write more tracks like Ugly just got released a new single called Breaking My World, as you can see right here.
Mm.
And all of that is building up to the second album.
Ah, yeah. What's that about? What big changes do you think there are going to be between the first and the second album?
A lot, actually. because, as I said before, when I did the first album, Our Season to Come, I sort of had no clear direction. So I was just sort of experimenting on what I thought was best at that time. As stated before, I when I listen to something, I just create something. So like when I did that surf track called, what was it called? Surf the East Line, I think it's called. Uh, I was listening to like what were they called again? The Ventures and those type of 60s type of bands. And I was like, yeah, this is cool. Let me just experiment and do that. But on this record I just got finished with, it's going to be much, much more grunge experience, grunge inspired, because I felt like after releasing Man of Many Faces, I think I found the consistency of what I want Sodia to sound. And this album is going to be, it's going to be a little cliche when I say this, but it's going to be a lot darker than our season to come. A little bit more bizarre, I guess, a little bit more weird,
Mm.
and a little bit more experimental too, I guess, even though it's going to be more grungy.
How do you write it? How do you write your music, like for Sodia or as well as for Bleakness of Eris?
Oh boy. It's not easy sometimes, because sometimes when you write something, you have to think. And sometimes it does not go well when you think too much. Because, like, sometimes you write one thing, you go like, oh, this is great, this is great. And then 2 minutes later, you write another thing, you go like, nah, this is not good. Let's change that habit. Sometimes it can go even both ways, where you're like, yeah, maybe we can improvise that bit a little bit better.
Mm.
So like it goes both ways. Musicians are very complicated sometimes. As ironic as that sound coming from me, he's a musician. Writing can be, well, it depends on how you mean, writing my music. Because do you mean like the entire song process, or do you mean like things like lyrics, for example?
Well, I mean, that's a great point because there's quite a lot involved. Like, I've usually got a few questions I ask during these interviews. One of them is, for example, like, what is your history in regards to music? Like, where did your journey begin? So, like, did you get like a formal education with music, or did you sort of teach yourself, or?
Oh, well, this goes a long, long way back. I started out with uh, an acoustic guitar, but I describe myself as a late intelligence boomer because even though I did start with an acoustic guitar, I did not sort of get to learn the full potential of it until I was about 11. Because up until then, I took like guitar lessons at your average local church, and
Okay.
then we used to play. And then we used to play like small lives for our family and friends. Really bizarre experience, especially when you're like a small teenager being constantly nervous. But I've sort of learned that a little bit more as I've started to play a little bit more live as of late. So you sort of get used to it. As I started playing acoustic, I sort of got a little bit bored. So after that, I kind of wanted an electric guitar. So I asked my dad, like, Dad, the acoustic guitar sort of bores me these days.
Mm.
Can I play something else? And he was like, yeah, we can play we can get you an electric guitar. And then we went to the music shop and we were like, hey, does this thing play metal? Of course it plays metal. It was on SG. I'm surprised that SG still alive and well.
That's fantastic. The first guitar is often really special, isn't it?
Yes, I wish I had it right here, right now, but it's on work. If I had it right here, I would have shown. But I don't have it right here, right now, unfortunately. But I agree. There's something very sentimental about your first instrument.
What got you into grunge in the first place, though? Because is that quite a shift from what you started with when you were younger? Like, did you get into it like when you were younger, or was it something you kind of moved into in stages?
This one's a little complicated because when I was younger, I I didn't even know what grunge was when I was young, or even metal in the first place, because up until I was like, let's see, 10 or 11, I mostly listened to things like, well, your average kids bop music video, either that or Britney Spears.
And you can't go wrong with Britney Spears, right?
Absolutely not. I mean, it's a guilty pleasure now.
Mm.
But I think what really got me sort of like the shift in music when I started to hear For Whom the Bell Tolls with Metallica.
Ah, right.
That's like an entry. That's like the entry level for everyone who wants to get into metal. So when I first heard that, you know, this the hairpins goes up, and you're like, what is this? This is very unorthodox, but I can't help but to love it. I think after that, your music taste sort of evolved more, and then it became more harder and heavier. I started listening to more death metal and such. Got into bands like Bloodbath, Dismember, the Swedish death metal scene. I think after when I did the project of Corrosion, uh, which I will talk about like later soon. I think after I split up, that I sort of more of my influences just came out of nowhere. That I love metal, but I also love grunge. Let's just do the best thing to cherish those influences separately.
Yeah, because you have got two projects. I think you've got Sodia, which we've been talking about, and also Bleakness of Eris. And for a lot of people, you have grunge on one hand, and then
Yep.
you have old school brutal death metal. How do you? What if we want to just quickly talk about your other project? Like, what's Bleakness of Eris all about for those that are interested?
Oh, this is going to be a long. So I mentioned Sodia a lot here, but before Bleakness of Eris, I did mention a previous project known as Corrosion.
Hmm.
That I created that project in 2014, and yeah, it's been a decade. Time flies fast,
It does.
but we had no clear directions with that project. It was like goalless, directionless. At that time, we didn't even have a name, so it was like pure nameless. So it was me, of course, as guitarist, Sammy Spaceman.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but then we had another uh, fine member who was known as Mick Dragon Slayer. He chose that, not me. Yes, we essentially use like pseudonyms just for the
Mm.
sake of it. But it was funny too, because um he he was like, what name should I go? Should I go for Dragon Slayer? It was like perfect. As Corrosion, we released two demos and a full debut album. And we had actual plans for a second album in 2019. So like we did the second demo back in 2019. Me and him discussed about it during, because we had the tracks ready. um, for our second album. But then we discussed it and was like, um, it felt very frustrating because the project went absolutely nowhere. So me and him discussed about it. It's like, how are we going to like do this? Because there's a jungle out there. There's so many bands, there's so many projects. No one is going to listen to us. So how the heck are we going to do this? So I just said, you know what, fuck it. Let's just make that second demo. Let's just tune down our instrument as low as we can, with it being with the sound still being audible. And let's just do that demo. And so we released what would be known as the Eaten Back to Death demo. And then 2020, when the pandemic started, where everyone was freaking out about toilet papers and such, what an amazing era that was. um, Corrosion split up. So, we started to do our own things. Dragon Slayer, he wanted to do his own solo project. He did an EP called Shorelines of Rusco. And I started to incorporate more of my serious projects. One of them was the Sixth Ranger, which you did a review on.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a long, long time ago. So
no, but it's cool. I mean, like, that means that you've been doing music for, like, if you're talking about since 2014, you've been doing it for a decade. And it's great that you had the opportunity to record that music with Mr. Dragon Slayer.
Things were so limited back then. Like, me and him, we used, like, the earliest of Easy Drummer 2. Even that sounded like shit. Kind of goes back to, as you can see, we released our debut album here. Let me talk a little bit more about that album, The Rotten Galaxy, if that's okay with you.
Totally fine. Yeah, that's all good.
So this is going to be complicated. So we actually released that album as Corrosion. So that was our full debut album. But it was released again back in 2019. But the songs were much different compared to ones they are in right now. So like they had an entirely different production, entirely different song names. I just was not happy with how the songs turn out to be. Have you ever had that, that feeling where you're like, you created an album that you thought was gonna be perfect, and then you release it, and you're like, yeah, this is gonna be cool now, and then 2 months later after I release, you're like, why does this sound like shit?
Do you think that's just because we why do you think that is?
It's a very it's so complicated. Like there's always that feeling that you always thought that you did something good, but then you listen to it, and then you listen to it, and you like start to compare to others, and then you're like, the songs weren't as strong as they could have been. And I think a lot of that has to do with the lack of transition, because I kind of sucked at programming drums. Because it's like you might do one thing, but then the drums just does another thing that you envision in your head, and then you're like, I think that could be a little bit better.
So is it simply like we just didn't have as much experience as we potentially needed in order to get the result that we wanted?
Yes, that is mostly it. I think it's mostly due to my, I would say, lack of experience as a musician at that time. Because 2019 me and 2024 me have like entirely different visions. Because I mean, we grow, humans grow, everything change.
Yeah.
But I will say this about that earlier version. If I hadn't done that album, I don't think I would have done Sodia. or even rebranded that project into Bleakness of Eris. It's weird to say that you are conflicted about a release that you don't really have much value of, but times change, things grow.
I mean, I think that I've been, I've heard enough people say they want to record an album and then not do it, but for you to do it, even if you're not totally happy with it now, is still pretty cool. Like, good on you for making this music and for actually going through with it and putting it out.
Thank you, man. The funny thing about this record is that there were so many times where I was like, maybe I want to re-record this entire album. But I think after we released our previous EP, and Despair Shall Come, as you can see right here on that picture screen right there.
I look at it as well. Your more recent release is, I mean, you've got And Despair Shall Come here.
Yep.
What are the big changes do you think between your like even production wise? Like what are the big changes between like 2019 and 2024 with the music you've made?
Oh, I would say a lot.
That's okay, because you mentioned Superior Drummer, for example, and like the limitations maybe of using stuff earlier on when you were beginning to get into this. Like, do you use now for like your drum production, for example, if you use drum production now that you didn't have access to back in 2019?
Right. Unfortunately, I still use Easy Drum,
No
but
judgment, it's all good.
but but I have a little bit better experience now because of the fact that I have been learning and I have been growing. And after doing music for a long time, it's like the things that you visions in your head right now, things like double kicks, how the snare wants, it's better encapsulated nowadays compared to, let's say, 2019, where I just had to figure it out. And also, I didn't play through a metronome either. So that made it much harder back then, at least.
Because I mean, technology with music production and stuff in general has changed. Like, so much. Do you find it easier to record music now because of those changes with production technology and such?
I would say yes, because I mean, back then excuse me, back then I would say you just used what you got basically, because back then in like the 80s and 90s, of course I wasn't born at the time, but it would cost a lot of money to basically to get stuff done. Whereas nowadays, you can have like a small what are they called again? I have completely forgot what they are called. They are essentially very important. They're small portable.
Are they the little audio hardware things that you can plug guitars and microphones into and stuff like that?
Yes, a DAW, that's what they're called. Oh my God. Yeah, and a DAW basically. That's you can easily plug in, record, and hopefully you've done a good job. Make sure everything's checks correct. I would say that's entirely best about it.
Because you mentioned as well that you'd done live performances in the past. Like, how do if you were to do like a live performance with this music, how would you do it? Either Sodia or Bleakness of Eris, how would you do it?
I think hiring band members would be the best thing. Um, when it comes to Sodia, that's actually very easy because where I work at, there's at least knowledgeable people who can play that stuff. So there's no problem in that. Bleakness of Eris is a little bit more complicated because, well, when you have a musical style that is like 300 beats per minute, for 2 minutes straight, I think that's a little bit harder to find those who are like in the suit of need of that kind of style.
Mm.
I'm not saying it's impossible to find those people. It's just it's a little bit more harder to like justify playing a full set with that music like live as opposed to Sodia.
Because, like, how important is it to keep the organic nature of a performance in a live situation? Like, is it okay for there to be, like, maybe the slight double kick off, or does it need to be, like, absolutely perfect during our live performances?
I'll say in a live performance, you can actually get away with it to be a little sloppy because a lot of bands that I grew up with, well, yeah, it's again Metallica, Iron Maiden, you name it. Even like in their recordings, you can still hear a little bit of mistakes. Like Iron Maiden's first album, for example, you can hear a couple of mistakes here and there. And even live they are, I wouldn't say sloppy, but you can still hear mistakes. And
Mm.
that's okay. Human does make mistakes. We're not perfect. And again, that's okay. We're bound to make mistakes. And I think that sort of, you know, adds to that element of humanity. Because as I listen to, things that have sort of like a humanic performance, sure, it may not be noticeable to the average ear that, wait a minute, I think I heard a mistake here and there. But, for us, quote unquote, experienced musicians who make a living with this, sometimes listen to it and then you go like, ah, mistake. But that's okay.
Yeah. I mean, I just ask because there's quite different performance vibes between grunge and like death metal, especially the technical death metal stuff. Like if you compare the two genres and the expectations of performances, especially with drums and stuff like that, they're quite different, aren't they?
Absolutely. They're much different. But it's kind of ironic as well that they sort of have some similarities. I don't mean like, musically, because we're comparing almost apples to oranges. One is very experimental, the other one will kick you in the face as hard as possible. But like at the end of the day, they still have some similarities. Because both musics, the one that I did still wants to sort of deliver a message. But like for Sodia, it's more of I would say more my personal experience. Whereas with Bleakness of Eris, it's more conceptual and fiction. And by like things like personal experience, I mean mostly like shits that I have, been through. Because it's sometimes things goes up, sometimes things goes down, etc., etc.
Oh, for sure. Because you talked about it cut this music coming from your life experiences. Are there any songs in particular you would like to talk about in relation to that?
Yeah, actually, I would like to talk about the third ugly. Yeah, that's the one. And of course, like the latest one, like Breaking My World, because those two tracks, I would say, really describes, yeah, more of my personal experience. Yes.
So which would you like to start with? Like what is ugly about?
All right, so ugly is very complicated because at first glance you might think the title might be reference to something very ugly. And that's true to an extent, but not really. Ugly is, I say, it's one of the most personal songs I've ever written. And that's saying a lot. This track kind of stems and goes into very personal details about what I consider to be soda abuse because it's very personal stuff because I was sort of like a heavy Coke drinker back in 2021, 2022. During those times, I would vomit a lot and I just could not eat for almost 3 days. And it was especially bad at the end of September where I almost everything just felt meaningless. When you're in that when you're in that when you're sort of spiraling out of control, it just sucks, man.
Mm.
Everything sucks. So, but after I sort of recovered in sort of November, I sort of, what was I saying? I was sort of like, no, fuck this. I want to write a song. But what's interesting about this song is that I did not compose any music. Um, I did not have any music composed for this song. So what I did was I took a sheet of paper and I just started venting lyrically of what I felt at the time. I didn't care if lyrically it was going to be all over the place. I didn't care if musically it was not going to be coherent. I just wanted to vent what I felt at the time. And to me, it felt very liberating because I have never written lyrics before the music. Time capsuling challenge as well, somewhat, but also sort of unique in a way. And that's kind of why the song is sort of very personal because it's not something that you want to write about.
Do you find that it was good for a sense of which do you prefer actually? Do you prefer now writing the lyrics before the music, or do you still prefer writing the music than the lyrics?
I think nowadays I prefer the music more because as stated before, I wrote the lyrics before the music, so I had no idea before then how the music was going to sound like. But when I started composing it and, everything started to make sense, I started to sort of appreciate what I wanted to make my message for because it's not, how do I say this? It's not something that, it's not every day that you write this sort of very, very somber and like immaculate lyrics because before this song, as stated before, on our first album or Season to Come, most of the songs had sort of like their own thing because it was just writing stuff for fun, like the title track, for example. You know, that was more of a catchy, hooky indie rock type of track. Of course, we still had, some sort of like somewhat personal details, like the track "Wishing for a Star," which is more about my social inexperience to want to have a conversation, but I end up just, fleeing away because I just cannot say more than 5 words. Yeah, there's the song "Wishing for a Star." It's weird looking back at this album and that it's more than 3 years old now.
I just want to say good on you for getting through that experience you were talking about earlier. I can't imagine it would have been easy to do so. It's also brave to write about it, to show sort of vulnerability as a musician.
I would say that was one of my most vulnerable moments, honestly. And yeah, 2022 was sort of like a liberating year because I had my ups, obviously, but things like that's not something that, I mean, it's something that you want to spread awareness, of course, but it's very hard to talk about when you have experienced that sort of thing.
Do you feel like you're more comfortable now talking about stuff like that in songs? Because is it important to open yourself up to a listener when you're writing music?
I say that depends solely on the musicians themselves.
Hmm.
but I would say for me it's more weird because it's not something that again I myself am not comfortable talking with because as stated before, it's a very personal message, and it's not something that I've ever written ever, not even for Bleakness of Eris, which is much darker than this, and that's saying a lot. But the difference is that Bleakness of Eris is more uh, conceptually fictional. So there you have a little bit more freedom to talk about. With this track, Ugly, um, it's more realistic in a way.
So, how does Breaking My World come into play, your most recent track?
Breaking My World is, oh, this track is, I wouldn't say it's as nearly as personal as Ugly, because Breaking My World is kind of dives into a more, how do I say this? You read a lot, you listen to a lot of news um, about things like school shootings or, you know, how do I say this? Like youngsters being cool and think that they can shoot innocent people just for the sake of it, or how the media tries to falsify and is saying that this is a very serious matter. And that's kind of what this track kind of dives into. It's more about the perspective of both worlds. Despite the title saying "Breaking My World," it's not about my world. It's more about again a perspective of either an insane youngster being a school shooter, or again, the perspective of media trying to falsify a dangerous subject being deemed very serious. I think the best way is to, if I, during your review of these tracks, I'll be happy to send them, of course.
That's totally fine. I mean, because I'm thinking with this direction that you've had, where you're talking about these more personal experiences, as well as your thoughts on Breaking My World, do you feel like the upcoming album is mostly going to be filled with tracks like this?
I would say yes. Of course, not all tracks are like, super, super somber because there's a track there called, well, as you can see, In My Time of Need, just more of a spin of an acoustic. Um, I never write acoustic songs, actually. It's sort of interesting because with this track, I was challenging myself to write something very simple. And that's saying a lot considering Sodia is by nature a little bit more simplistic musically. But with this track, I was listening to Polly by Nirvana, and I was so fascinated with how, Kurt Cobain sort of incorporated these very simple chords while still having that angel's voice, and how we can incorporate all this melody and harmony. I was like, okay, um, I want to write something. Let me challenge myself by writing something so simple with just only two structures with a couple of chords, and then have someone more experienced than me just sing over it because I can't.
Ah. Because I noticed that you've got some collaborations. Like with the previous track, you've got Tommy
Yep.
Temp, and with Breaking My World, and with this one, you've got Augustine. Ah, hey, what's it been like
Yep.
collaborating with people?
Oh, it feels interesting and different because I felt like as I gained more experience as a musician, I started to feel myself more comfortable collaborating with other people. Uh, and I just could not do that. Even in our first album, it was mostly me um, the guy, Dragon Slayer. Yeah, he sang a couple on this record too. I feel like it's very important as a musician to grow because you don't want to do the same thing over. I feel like when I collaborate with other people, um, and they sort of like share their ideas and their experiences, with like, okay, maybe the slush vocals I send to them can be maybe incorporate a little bit more of a harmony here or maybe an overdub. And you're like, okay, that's a cool idea because I want to be open more to change. I want to be, as stated before, I want to continue grow as a musician. I want to continue make music until I no longer can. But and I want to, I want to. If I'm down here, I want to, go up here beyond the sky.
Mm.
So like, I want to exceed my limits of not just collaborating, but just you know get more feedback, get more ideas. So you know, in the future, I can learn basically and exceed from basically there as I'm doing with this album.
So, if you were to try and give like people who've listened to the first album an indication of what they should expect in the second, which am I okay to say? I think we mentioned it was the Grey Sea, right? The second album.
Yep.
Um,
Thank you.
no, it's okay. What should people expect with this release that's out? I think on the June 21st.
What should people expect? Well, more grunge first and foremost. I don't think I have stated that enough.
Hmm.
And the second thing is, well, as I stated before, much, much more serious topics like, once again, substance abuse, ugly. No, sorry, Man of Many Faces, substance abuse. Ugly is more, again, very, very personal. Or things like maybe I am blank as hell.
That's okay. We've done really well. It's been a good interview so far.
Thank you. What did I mention? I said substance abuse. I said suicide, although I don't want to say that. That's the wrong word, basically.
So it's more about some serious topics, but so are people going to expect to need to commit to that throughout the album, or are we gonna like how do you balance the intensity out with the music? Is it just going to be equally intense the music, or
Absolutely. I mean, the tracks themselves aren't as nearly as long as Our Season to Come, but there will be some light moments too, as well, in my time of need. And what else is there? There is, holy hell, I think that's the only track there that is actually light.
at least I mean, not that I have an issue with it personally. I think it's great that we've got a clear vision for what we want, but I also think it's kind of dope that we have an acoustic track just because sometimes there can just be that one thing that gets a more sort of like a listener that's used to more gentle stuff over the line, you know?
You can have at least one sort of ballady track. Because if it's just, all on the same thing intensity, things does get kind of dull for a while. I mean, you want variation, and I think that's important.
Oh, absolutely. Because, like, what do you think are the main lessons that you've learned from, like, when you started in 2014 to releasing this latest album in 2024?
A lot. I have learned so much because, again, back when I started doing music, 2014, and creating Corrosion, again, I had no clear goal. I was as directionless as a pack of feather, basically goalless, directionless. Um, but as time went on, again, I sort of found my niche I think it just comes down to after I've just released stuff that I wasn't as thrilled with, but that's okay. You learn from experience, basically. You're like, I think you can look back at certain things and you can sort of, um, I mean, not be thrilled with, but at least you can smile at it and be like, at least you've come a long way. Because at the end of the day, we all got to start somewhere. We all got to suck somewhere. Or at least we got to start to suck and then get better. Kind of what I felt like once the first project Corrosion was split up, and then I rebranded into Bleakness of Eris, and before that created Sodia. I knew more what I wanted for my direction for what I wanted to release, whether it's grunge or left metal.
So, if you were to look at someone who is starting out on their musical journey, not necessarily knowing their own direction, right? What advice would you give to up and coming musicians who are maybe on a similar path to yours?
I guess start by releasing materials, I guess. Or you can, start releasing singles. That's a good start. Unfortunately, I did not do that. I just dumped everything. So lesson learned, don't do that. I see the best advice is don't give up. And as I stated before, it's okay to suck in the beginning. I sucked in the beginning. I still suck now, unfortunately. Or at least as a guitarist, as a musician, no, we're bound to do mistakes in the beginning, but that's okay. You can look, you can at least look at them, gain your feedback, and then start to improvise what you could do better. That's the best advice I can give, or at least given the experience that I have sort of felt over the past decade.
Well, look, for what it's worth, I can say I've honestly enjoyed my time with your material. It's been great. There's a lot of variety there for sure between the two projects you've mentioned, and it was also good to learn today about Corrosion and where things started.
Thank you, man.
No, you're absolutely welcome. Thank you for your time today. I suppose I'm just making sure we've talked about it. We've talked about both projects. We've talked about where they started and where they came from. We've talked about your like influences and everything like that. We've talked about like your upcoming album. Is there anything else
Yeah.
you'd like to talk about in regards to your musical projects at this point in time?
I guess not really. I mean, I'm a busy man, unfortunately. I mean, I have been I have been releasing so much stuff, and the crazy thing, even after when this album is released, I'm still not done. Still recording, going to release more material soon. Hopefully in the autumn of this year, if not, maybe 2025, early. The possibilities are endless.
Exactly. Well, it just makes me happy to know that you've got that same level of passion and that you feel like you've grown. Because sometimes musicians can get stuck and kind of feel like they've hit a ceiling. But I'm glad that you're continuing to move forward and looking to continue to go up and up.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
Before we finish up today, as I know it's getting quite late where you are at the moment, where can people find out more about your music?
Well, you can find both Sodia and Bleakness of Eris on Spotify, of course. You can find us on Bandcamp. We're still a work in progress there, but you can still find us there. You can find us on YouTube, and we also have a Facebook page. Link will be in the description below.
Link will absolutely be in the description below. And just, Sammy, thank you very much for your time today, Mr. Sammy Spaceman. Hopefully you have a fantastic evening, and I wish you the best of luck for your upcoming album release.
Likewise, man. It was fun talking to you.
Have a fantastic evening. I'll catch you later.
You too, man. Have a great day.
And that was my interview with Sodia, Sammy Spaceman of Sodia and Bleakness of Eris. It's been a while since I did an interview. But I'm glad to be back into them. You can see that the little camera icon is buzzing up here, meaning that I've just about time for me to go. But hopefully you guys enjoyed the interview, and hopefully you learned a bit more about Sammy Spaceman and their projects, and hopefully you guys can check out their upcoming album. But in the meantime, please to go show Sammy Spaceman, Sodia, and Bleakness of Eris some love via their various social medias and Spotify page, as we mentioned in the interview. The links will be down in the description. And stay cool and stay safe, and please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as either help more than ever with all the crazy stuff going on in the world. And I'll catch you in the next interview. Spiderhands out.